The Ainu and the Ryukyuans are two groups of indigenous peoples within Japan. First, I will focus on the Ainu. The Ainu are often associated with the northern island of Hokkaido. When I studied abroad in Japan and people asked me what Wisconsin is like, I usually told them it was like America's Hokkaido, as it's famous for its snowy winters and dairy products. But who are the Ainu that have historically lived there? What do Japanese people know about them and their struggles?
I haven't really thought about it, I'm sorry.
I haven't really met them in person, so there are things we just don't know.
They are not really known, but I think they are an ethnic group who really preserved their traditions. So I think their rights and so on should be protected.
The Ainu are a people struggling to retain their cultural identity in a society that often champions conformity and surrounded by people who, even if not guilty of discrimination themselves, are often ignorant of the trials the Ainu face as a people and individually in the long run as well as in their everyday lives. Many of the Ainu I've seen interviewed confess to hiding their heritage for most of their lives. Some said they don't want to be bullied or made fun of. Others said they don't want to marry another Ainu person because they didn't want their kids to be recognized as Ainu and go through the same hardships that they did. Others had concerns about finding a job. A historic reason for this could be the ironically titled Hokkaido Former Aborigines Protection Act in 1899. This act has a few commonalities with the General Allotment Act, as it was at least partially inspired by it. It masqueraded under the guise of helping sort out the land by giving each family a plot and taking the leftovers. It was also an attempt to turn the traditionally hunter-gatherers into farmers.
なぜ自分の親しい友人、知人からもいい加減諦めなさいよって。お願いします。お願いします。お願いいたします。これからですね。油断できませんよ。報われたと思いますよ。
The act also established the Ainu as former Aborigines, that is to say, formerly Ainu, from that point on, Japanese. They carried this out by forcing Ainu to take on Japanese surnames. Ainu place names were also exchanged for Japanese ones. Various cultural and religious practices were banned, from the tattooing of girls' faces to the ritual burning of a deceased person's house. Special schools for Ainu were set up for the younger generations to learn Japanese language and culture, as well as agriculture. In these schools and elsewhere, the Ainu language was forbidden. Much like we've seen studying the indigenous peoples of America, these issues still pervade today. This can definitely be seen through the disappearance of the Ainu language. The Ainu language traditionally had no written system. Sometimes due to the proximity of Russia it's written in Cyrillic, but usually it's written in Japanese. The Japanese written alphabet for foreign words follows the alphabet for Japanese words. That is to say, it's built for Japanese words, and it's not very convenient for writing those in other languages. This is largely due in part to most of the characters ending in a vowel. Sometimes this works fine for foreign words. For instance, America is America. However, other times it doesn't work as well, with words like orange becoming oranji. You can see how this would cause issues, especially after having the language banned for so long and all the records of the language bending the words in such a way to fit the written system. The Ainu language has not only suffered a great loss in terms of the number of speakers, but it's also been changed dramatically. There have been some steps in the right direction. It took the Japanese government far too long, but they finally recognized the Ainu as an indigenous people in 1997. The Hokkaido Former Aborigines Act was also finally repealed in 1997 and replaced with a law promoting Ainu culture. Prominent steps for cultural preservation have been taken in Hokkaido especially, and groups such as the Ainu Rebels, who mix Ainu language, dance, and music with more modern forms of rock and hip-hop, are inspiring more youth to get involved with preserving the culture as well. However, there are still challenges. Ainu do not solely exist in Hokkaido. Many have moved to other parts of Japan. Many of the organizations and acts apply specifically to Hokkaido and overlook Ainu living in other prefectures. The number of Ainu that go on to higher education is still significantly smaller than the Japanese. For every person who proudly claims their Ainu heritage, there are still many more who hide it for various reasons. But some look to the successes of other indigenous peoples overseas for inspiration.
When I saw Canadian indigenous people performing and thought cool, I want to be like them. These were indigenous people from abroad. But really I wanted to be inspired by my own Ainu people. Now I want to become someone who can influence and inspire the younger generation in the same way that I was influenced and inspired.
If Hokkaido is Japan's Wisconsin, then the Ryukyu Islands are Japan's Hawaii. The largest and most well-known of the Ryukyu Islands is Okinawa. After a long history with complicated relationships with both Japan and China, the Ryukyu Kingdom was not officially annexed until 1879 and became known as the Okinawan Prefecture. The last king of the Ryukyus died in 1901. The Ryukyuans have had many problems similar to the Ainu. Language loss is also an issue, as in an effort to assimilate the Ryukyuans into Japanese society, at first they insisted that their languages were merely a dialect of Japanese. When it became clear that despite a common ancestry they were not able to understand each other, the Japanese government did its best to get rid of the languages by punishing those who used the language at school or work. Today they still experience discrimination, especially on the main island. It is harder for them to find work or even a place to live. One of the current main issues are the American bases located on Okinawa. 74% of America's bases in Japan are located in Okinawa, which is less than 1% of Japan's landmass. Many Okinawans view the base's presence, which takes up 1/5 of the island, as discriminatory. They feel it was put there because the land means less to the government. Besides the noise problems and the loss of space, there have also been some serious incidents involving troops that have left Okinawans with a bitter taste. Even more so than that, however, many people are disappointed in the Japanese government for ignoring their protests. Some people say it makes them feel as if they are second-class citizens. All of the issues presented in here are more complicated than time allows me to discuss. If you're interested in any of the issues I've alluded to, such as the incidents between the bases and Okinawans and forced Japanese education of the Ainu, or any of the issues I didn't have time to address, such as the Ainu in Russia or the history of the Ryukyu Islands, I encourage you to find out more.